Hi, and welcome to this screencast. This screencast will take the place of our class on Friday. Again, I apologize for not being able to be in class this Friday, but as I told you the other day, we have a tennis match, so I'll be on my way to Charlottesville by the time this class meets on Friday. So instead you have this short little screencast, and basically what we are going to do in this screencast is exactly the same thing that I covered in class during first, second, and third period on Friday, so that you will get the same kind of information so that you won't fall behind. So this screencast, as you can see, will deal with Chapter 11, Section 2 and 3. So we're going to start in Section 2, and these notes right here will tie on to the notes that we took in class on Tuesday. If you organize your notes that way, it's going to cover some of the same material that you had for homework going into the block period that you took your quiz on. But there are a couple of things that your book kind of leaves out of those notes that I want to make sure that we notice and that we take a look at. So we'll look a little bit at Russia under the Mongols here. So that's the main topic, Russia under the Mongols. And we had looked in class on Tuesday how the Mongols rose up and kind of gained strength at the same time as Russia was kind of going downhill a little bit. And as a result, the Mongols conquered Russia. So Mongols conquered Russia, but again, we looked at this in class on Tuesday because the Mongol Empire was so large, they governed this very loosely. And you had a question on your quiz in regards to what the Mongols demanded from the Russians, and it really was just two things: loyalty and a tribute. So as long as the Russians paid a certain amount of money every year, and as long as they did not revolt, they can pretty much do whatever they wanted to. The Mongols really did not get too involved in this. But of course, the Russians still want to kind of run their own country. They want to be independent. They want to get rid of the Mongols. And slowly but surely, they start to kind of make their way away from the Mongols. And there's one person here that's central to this, and that's a guy named Alexander Nevsky. He was a Russian leader in the 1200s. So he's a Russian leader in the 1200s. He was one of the leading Russian noblemen in the 1200s. He was a great warrior. And in the 1240s, the Germans invade Russia. So things are about to get a little bit complicated here, and I want to make sure that you can kind of follow along with this. So the Mongols control Russia, but again, the Mongols really aren't very involved here. There's not a whole lot of Mongols in Russia. They just kind of let the Russians do their own thing. And at the same time, in the 1200s and the 1240s, the Germans are on the move. They are conquering a lot of territory. And in the 1240s, the Germans invade Russia. So now the Russians are basically under attack from two different areas here. For one, they have to deal with the Mongols, which they've kind of done, relatively well. They're controlled by the Mongols, but not really bothered by them. But at the same time, these Germans are invading the Russians. They're coming with their army. They're taking over more and more territory. So things are not looking good for Russia. So things are not looking good for Russia. But this guy, Alexander Nevsky here, puts together an army to try to defeat the Germans. So he tried to defeat the Germans here, and he actually succeeds in doing so. Sorry, I misspelled army there. He put together an army to try and defeat the Germans. And in 1242, there was a huge battle on a frozen lake. It's called the Battle on the Ice. So there's a deciding battle in 1242, and the Russians win. There's actually a very famous Russian movie, one of the most famous Russian movies that's been made about this battle, and I have a still picture from this movie right here. This is Alexander Nevsky here on the right-hand side, and he's fighting the German leader right here. These are the German troops over here, and here are the Russian troops over here, and they're fighting on the ice here. So the Russians win. And as you can imagine here, the Mongols were pretty happy about this. So why would the Mongols be happy about the Russian win? Well, for one thing, if the Germans had taken over the Russians, it would have been hard for the Mongols to keep control over this territory, and in all likelihood the Germans would have taken over the whole Russian territory, and the Mongols would have lost the territory. They would have lost all the money that they're getting from the Russians. So they were very, very pleased with the fact that the Russians won. So as a thank you, the Mongols make Alexander Nevsky what's called the Grand Prince of Moscow. So they basically put him in charge of the city of Moscow. And the reason why I want to mention this is that your book is actually wrong here. Your book argues that a different person was made Grand Prince, but it's Alexander Nevsky, who is the first Grand Prince of Moscow. And he is the one that's going to lead this Russian movement away from the Mongols, because of the fact that when the Mongols made Alexander Nevsky Grand Prince of Moscow, they gave him a little bit of power. They basically said, as a thank you for defeating the Germans, we are going to kind of let you run Moscow and Russia. You won't have to pay as much tribute. So they lowered the tribute. So they lowered the tribute as well. And the Mongols thought, this is all going to be fine and good. The Russians will be happy, and things will just kind of continue the way that they have been in the past. The problem was that the Russians took this as a sign that the Mongols were weakening. And that's also true. The Mongols were weakening at this point in the mid 1200s. The Mongols were not doing very well. They were kind of on their last little breath here. So Russians took this as a sign that the Mongols were weakening, and they started to oppose the Mongols more and more. So they started to oppose the Mongols more. And again, your book then does a pretty good job of outlining how the Russians eventually got away from the Mongols. And then the person who eventually breaks completely with the Mongols and liberates Russia is Ivan III, or Ivan III. This is in 1480. So Ivan III in 1480 finally breaks with the Mongols. So as you can see here, this deciding battle here took place in 1242 when the Russians defeated the Germans. So it takes about 240 years before they can finally break with the Mongols. But the beginning to the end of the Mongol rule in Russia is 1242 and this great win by Alexander Nevsky, which is why he's considered one of the heroes of Russian history. He's been celebrated with movies and he's on all kinds of stamps and all kinds of paintings and statues. He's all over Russia even today, so he's a huge national hero. So that's the end of section 2 in chapter 11, and I just want to spend a minute or two on section 3. And what I want to address here is the question that I asked you in the voice thread. And again, we looked at the Seljuk Turks, so this is going to be section 3 here. And how they rose during the 800s to about 1000. During the 800 to the 1000, and we outlined that in the voice thread. And I asked you the question, what do you think is going to happen now when they grew stronger and stronger and they started to attack the Byzantine Empire? And most of you kind of got the right idea here. What is going to happen is that the Seljuk Turks are going to grow very, very strong, and they're basically going to outmatch the Byzantine Empire. The only problem was that as soon as they had kind of put themselves in a position to be stronger than the Byzantine Empire, they kind of ran out of good leaders. This is one of those unfortunate things in history. So they ran out of good leaders. And what I mean by that is that they had a couple of good leaders during the 1000s, but you know, starting around 1100, they just had a bunch of people that really did not know how to run an empire very well. So nobody knew how to run an empire in a good fashion. So they're still very strong, but they're never really able to take advantage of this strength that they had built up during these 200 years from 800 to about the 1000s. So they could never really take advantage of their power. So although they control a lot of territory, they never really have a huge impact in the Middle East, and they should have been very, very strong, but really ended up being not as strong as they really should have been. So that's kind of the answer to the question that I posed on the voice thread, and this is going to be the end of section 3. I hope that you have had a very enjoyable Friday, and I will see you in class on Monday, where we will do some review before your test on Tuesday. Have a great weekend.